So basically, random numbers are useful in a lot of programming tasks. Like for example, when you are working with probability and statistics, you'll need random values. When you are developing games like dice examples or card examples for any for example, blackjack or poker, when you're developing games like that, you'll also need the random numbers. Next, simulation programs and statistical programs, encrypting and decrypting. For all such programs, you will need random numbers. So for the random numbers, unlike range function, we'll have to import the random module. The range function is a standard library, so you can directly call it when you're using the program, right? That's what we have done in our chapter 4, that is when you are working with loops. In this case, you are going to first import the module and then use a function from this random module. So random module includes the library functions for working with the random numbers. And as I've mentioned, you will be using the dot notation. So module name dot function name. The dot notation will be calling a particular function from that module. So one of the functions, or will be discussing like 2 to 3 functions from the random module. One of the function is the rand int function. It will randomly generate a number in the range provided by the arguments. Again, so returns a random number that to part of a program that is called, that the function is being called. Return integer can be used anywhere. You can experiment with the function as well. So we'll look at the examples. So the randint function will have 2 arguments and it will generate a random number with those 2 arguments. So number is equal to random dot randint. Random is the module name. Dot notation. Randint is the function that you are calling from this random module. 1, 100 are your arguments. So the output from here will be an integer. It could be any integer from this from these 2 arguments. So first execution. So let's say, okay, so the output from this random.randint will be assigned to the number variable, right? We do know that. That is because we are using an assignment operator. So some number will be fed to number, and when you print number, you will see some number from the ranges of 1 and 100. Again, in this case, when you are using 1 and 10, like when you are directly printing a random.randint 110, a random number from 1 and 10, 1 through 10 is displayed on your screen because you are directly using print. So this is a representation to show you that you can print random numbers directly instead of creating or assigning the numbers. If you want to make some changes, or if you want to perform calculations depending upon the output from this function, then it is a better option to save that as a variable and then take that variable in your next steps. But otherwise, if you're just going to see the value, you can directly use the print function. Next function is rand range function. So this is similar to range function, but it will randomly select the integer from the resulting sequence. So we do know the functionality of the range function, right? We do know that range function has 3 arguments. If it is 1 argument, then it is from 0 to that argument minus 1. So for example, here it is 0 through 9 because 10 is not inclusive. If it is 2 arguments, then the first argument is the starting, second is the ending limit, and second argument is also not inclusive. If it has the 3 arguments, the first is the starting limit, next second argument is the ending limit, third is the step value. You already know this. If this looks like this is if this feels like you have never heard about random or range function before, then go back to chapter 4 and then go through that again, because by this time you're already done. You have already completed your test 1. So you should be familiar with the range functions. So the next function we have is random function. This will return a random float in the range of 0 and 1. So this does not receive any arguments. So when you just enter random.random, this will give you a decimal value as well. That is the meaning of floating point. So when you want to print something from 0 to 1 in terms of decimal values, then you can directly use random.random. But what if you want to see a floating point output by giving arguments? In that case, you can use the uniform function. So random.uniform will give you the floating point output, but it also has arguments. Okay. So the next topic is random number seeds. So the random number created by functions are actually pseudo-random numbers. And the seed value is the value that will initialize the formula that generates the random numbers. So when you are trying to work with the internal clock of your computer, then in that case, you can just use the random.seed function to specify the desired seed value. But that is for the future. But for now, the major functions that we are going to work with are randint range, that rand range. Next, we have random.random, next random.uniform. These are the 4 functions that you'll be working with. So you should be familiar and you should understand those functionalities as well. Okay. So in the next lecture, we'll be talking about how to create our own value returning functions.